creative imagination began with a new art form. Makes me feel I belong.
Good afternoon, cuties, and welcome to Cutie Connect Café, where we tell stories about everything queer and tech. Spring is in 9 days. Well, some of us maybe a little bit longer, but really exciting to get the great weather. I'm Naufel, co-founder at QueerTech, and your host today. I am based in the beautiful city of Montreal, Tehuantepec. I would like to begin by acknowledging that QueerTech is located on the unceded indigenous lands. The Kenya-Kenaha nations is recognized as the custodians of the land and waters on which we gather today. As usual, I would like to thank our QT annual partners for their support. Unity Technologies, VanHack, SpaceSafe, BreedLife, and Local Logic. And I'm also really excited to welcome a new partner that's starting with us this year, an annual partner. Sage will be joining us this year. Sage is the market leader for integrated accounting payment systems and supporting the ambition of Words entrepreneurs. I'm really excited. We'll be doing a lot of activities, and you'll get to learn more about Sage and their story. As you know, the board, our job board is live, and you can connect with our partners if you're looking for a job. So go to queertech.org/job, apply there. We will be doing a bigger launch for the job board at the job fair, but check out, we have also a lot of new companies that will be going live on there. As you know also that QueerTech is hosting the first national LGBTQ+ virtual job fair. That's part of our career program, and our goal is to create a space for our community and tech companies to connect. The virtual job fair is on April 8th from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. I invite you to save the date. You can also check out the link on our website to start. Registration is open, so you can register and share it with anyone that's looking for a job. We will also be announcing all the companies that will be participating at the QT QT job fair sometimes next week, so stay tuned. I also want to thank all our volunteers and also people who continuously donate to QueerTech and support us. Thank you so much for your support. And for those who love what we do and want to support QueerTech, you can donate to us on our website, queertech.org. Thank you. So before I get, and I know everyone is excited to meet our guest today, I want to let you know that if you have any questions or comment throughout the duration of this live stream, you can write it in a question or comment on the comment box on the social media that you're on. And feel free to tag anyone that you want to inspire today or share the story with them, our QueerTech story. Please be advised that sometimes we do show the comments and the questions on the live stream, so just be advised that we might do that. So today, our guest is Principal Data Scientist at ClearBank, a fintech company providing growth capital for online businesses. She's a community member of Aggregate Intellect, a machine learning platform with over 13,000 YouTube subscribers. She's also the founder and sole developer of Quill Game Studios. You can find her speaking at conferences such as PyCons, TMLS, and events like this one. So please welcome Susan Shu Chang to the show, and you may reveal yourself, Susan.
Hello.
Good afternoon. How are you, Susan?
I've been good. The weather is quite nice recently, so I'm very happy about that.
I'm very excited also. You're looking, it's going to start warming up in Montreal, so that's going to be really exciting. So, Susan, before we dive into a lot of the questions that I have for you, why don't you give us a quick overview? Tell us more about yourself and tell us about your pronouns.
Yeah, for sure. My name's Susan. I go by she, her pronouns. I am, I guess, as you have greatly mentioned, great intro there. I'm a principal data scientist at ClearBank, and I do game development on the side as a hobby. And I write also on my website, which is susanshu.com, and I write about just like productivity and career and stuff like that. I love to play video games. I maybe play too much these days due to the pandemic. And I guess that's like a bit about myself. And I'm really glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for coming and sharing your story. So, I want to track it a little bit back, and we're going to start at the beginning of your life. And so tell us a little bit, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What did you study at university? Walk us through your main events, if you would.
Yeah, and I actually don't get to talk about this a lot, so this is great.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I was born in Taiwan, and when I was growing up, my family moved between Taiwan and here. So it was like 5 years here and then 5 years there kind of situation. So actually that was a big part of my childhood, which is changing scenery very, very frequently. But then it also caused like maybe some sense of loneliness too, because I went to 3 elementary schools, and
Wow.
when I went to middle school, I knew no one. And then when I went to high school, yet again, it was in yet another city and I didn't know anyone either. So I think that kind of forced me to get to know people, like even though others have known each other. But I just mentioned that because it's like an interesting experience. I don't really meet too many people exactly like that. But that's one thing that I think characterized my early life. And so in middle school and high school, I actually was in Taiwan, and I did their kind of version of the SATs, which is like the entrance exams. And after that, I came to Waterloo, Ontario for just studying. I studied economics at the University of Waterloo, and then I did my master's at the University of Toronto. And I guess like that was also a move between Waterloo and Toronto. So it's just like a more and more moving. I actually haven't lived somewhere for more than 5 years. I think Waterloo and Toronto are up there, which is surprising, but
Yeah.
like Yeah. Come on, like why Waterloo?
Hopefully now you're in Toronto, right?
Yes, yes, I'm currently based in Toronto.
Hopefully you'll be there for a longer period of time. This it's really interesting, kind of hear your story. So you did your undergrad in economics, and then so how did you get into data science and programming?
Yeah, so this is like it's just like my early life too. It's like very like non-direct and very very I don't know, winding road here. So when I was in undergrad, I actually didn't really know what I was going to do. Like I think in economics the options are kind of um yeah, like I could go to maybe Bank of Canada,
Mhm,
Stats Canada,
mhm,
and I could go into maybe banking and stuff like that. But then I
mhm.
realized that that wasn't really for me, even though I really liked economics. I mean, I liked it enough to do a master's,
Yeah.
but in Waterloo, I actually was starting to make games for fun, just like really out of
Mhm.
fun. And like recently, I went to look at the first game that I made. It was like in 2016 or
Uh-huh.
so. Yeah, I made it for a hackathon in Waterloo. And um, it just like really sparked my interest to
Mhm,
learn. I was learning programming just for fun at the side because
mhm.
I had no idea what to do. I maybe had too much time on my hands.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just like learned programming, and then I liked economics, but then I wasn't sure what to do. And then I went
Mhm,
to grad school because I liked it and happened to have good grades for it. But
mhm,
actually in Waterloo I failed 3 courses like in
mhm.
my first, and my first year to third year were like very rocky, and I was not doing that well at all. And then I think I finally got kind of like things in order in my third and fourth
Mhm,
year. Um, so effectively after that, I finally was able to um, apply for grad school and have some just like I guess continue to procrastinate on my
mhm.
life for one more year. But yeah, in the meantime, I learned about data science from a friend who was basically like, oh, you have because in economics there's a lot of statistics
Mhm.
education, and that was something that I was really good at when
Yeah.
I finally got my, I guess, academics back together.
Mhm,
Like that was the thing that I did like extremely well in, which is like the stats or what's called like
mhm.
econometrics. And then I didn't know that was related to data science at all. And
Yeah.
then yeah, like my friend just said, like this combined with the programming that you picked up from game development, like there was a
Mhm,
field there called data science, and you
mhm.
could look that up. So then I had to Google that. And then I was like, oh, this is actually such a shocking combination of my skills.
Yeah.
And I was from there, I was like, what other way can I, combine my skills, right? This is perfect. And I kind of pursued it from there.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, I'm always fascinated when people pick up coding, right? So you said you were interested in gaming. Were you playing games before? Like, were you a gamer and then you wanted to program a game, or like how did you stumble upon that? And then I have questions like getting to program and getting yourself to learn it is an amazing way, right? So I want to talk about that also.
Yeah, I think the initial interest definitely came from gaming. I was gaming a
Mhm.
lot, and which probably
Mhm.
contributed to my bad grades. But there was this game called Overwatch, and it came out, and then I think that was like I actually don't remember. It was like 2014. Don't
Mhm.
quote me on this, but I think it launched, and then I was playing like 8 hours a day for like a whole week.
Mhm.
So
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it was like more than a full time job. But okay,
Yeah,
that's just yeah, that's like degenerate, and I
yeah.
am.
Were
But
you playing for fun? Were you streaming your game when you were playing? It's
oh,
just okay.
I streamed casually at the time. I actually was able to stream a bit of Overwatch, I think,
Mhm.
at the time,
Mhm.
but I didn't do anything like super meaningful with it at the time. I was just like
Mhm.
checking it out. But I did because I
Yeah.
like to tinker with that stuff, even because at the time I was just in, I guess, as an economics major, I still like to tinker around and
Mhm.
set up like streams and stuff. I was able to do that, but
Yeah.
yeah, not with a lot of consistency there, so there
Yeah.
was never any traction, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting. And so, what was the moment where you're like, you know what, I want to develop a game? How did you go through that thought process? What was like? How did you get started?
That's a really good question. I think that's like kind of tough. I think because like I like to play games, and then I started to understand more. I feel like I'm the type of person where I really like to create things. Like I like to write. In high school, I wrote like, I guess like fiction and stuff like
Mhm.
that, just for myself. And
Mhm.
I felt that I like to. Oh yeah, I guess in high school I also just like tinkered around a bit with like music, and I just knew that I like to create things. And I guess like for me, video games was like another thing that I
Yeah.
could create. And it's like a medium with
Mhm.
like both visual and audio and like text, like
Mhm.
story text. And then there was all things that I really liked to create and just like doodle and stuff like that. I didn't do the art for my
Mhm.
game, but like I just think that maybe growing up, right, like I had to kind of occupy myself with all this
Mhm.
moving around. So then I had
Yeah.
developed a lot of just like that kind of, I guess like what you would see maybe as like a kid who's just like, you know, not really doing anything, but
Yeah.
just I guess like messing around. And I guess that all luckily worked out for just like no reason at all.
Yeah. What was the first programming language that you learned?
I would. Oh yeah, I guess like JavaScript to be honest. And I really started out with like HTML and CSS. Like to
Mhm.
be honest, like I did that. My first game was made with a little bit of JavaScript in
Mhm.
it, and just to like tweak the look of it. And then I think from there I learned Python,
Mhm.
and I guess I got like more and more deep into Python because there was it's like really useful
Mhm.
professionally too, but then I was using it mostly to make games and like make like silly scripts and stuff. And I learned a bit of C++ after that for another game engine, which is called like Unreal Game Engine,
Yeah.
which is just another tool to make video games.
Yeah.
And but I think starting out with like those little things that I could tweak, like the very, very beginning, like I guess HTML and CSS was just a way to be like, hey, I can change the look
Yeah.
of a software
Yeah.
visually. And I actually felt like I was behind at the time when I started, because actually a lot of people I think know those two kind of like they I don't know if it's like the people who make like Tumblr themes or like
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
like blog themes. Like I felt they were all like much better than me
Yeah.
at the time when I was starting out, because I've never done those things. I always just like
Yeah.
downloaded themes. I never
Yeah.
tweaked my own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I download themes.
yeah, yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So it's really interesting, kind of hearing your story, because you were a writer, and I did read some of the content that you write online, and really loved it. And that's why I was like, you should share the websites with the community. But writing fiction, great. That makes you a really good writer. Then you play the game, then you almost write stories for the game, and then you added that coding piece to it. And so how did you become a data scientist? So was it after university, you did your master, and then is that when you were starting to think about data science? And was your first job a data science job, or what was the first job you got after university?
Yeah, my first job out of school was in data science, and it's actually really weird. Like, I think my life is definitely non-linear because, like, so I guess I technically started doing the hobby game dev first because I started in undergrad, but then I was also picking up like all the stats knowledge from my formal education in economics. But then it was in masters that I found out about the field of data science. So then I had to kind of add some more self-learning to that, because I knew Python for programming at that point, but then I didn't know anything to do with data science. So there's like packages that are very commonly used in the data science field, like I guess like NumPy or Pandas, like just as a very basic, at least 2 packages. I had never used those before, so I had to do a lot of self-learning to catch up on that. And it's very funny because my first job, when I was studying my master's, I was interviewing as well, and the first 2 like major offers that I was chasing and that I got, like one was actually in well, now I can say it was in Ubisoft, and it was in project coordinator or whatever, like basically project manager, but I think they have a specific name for it that's like the bottom of the totem pole, or like the pole in general. So I think that I had to make a decision at the point, and I really had to say, I want to do more. One thought is like I asked a lot of my friends that I knew, and I think that one thing was if I start from a technical role, it's easier to go in, let's say, management or project management or product management, rather than the other way around. And I had another friend who went to, I guess, another big tech company, and then she was looking into consulting as well. But then she also felt starting at the technical individual contributor role was easier and more flexible down the road, and I still feel that way. I mean, it's also possible to go the other way around, right? It's just probability.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting. So you mentioned you self-taught, self-learned, and I think a lot of people in general are scared of the idea of coding, right? So people, we see more and more and non-traditional paths to coding and to tech, right? And I see more and more companies not requiring, software engineer degrees to come and be a programmer at the company. There's different paths how people can get there. You learn on your own, and so I wanted you to kind of share with us what are some of the resources you use? If someone wants to learn today, should they start with HTML, CSS? Where should they begin? And to kind of, especially if they're like, there's a lot of people I'm thinking they're economic degrees and they only think about economic possessions, right? And so you mentioned it's a limited field, but there is this opportunity to become a data scientist if they want it. And it is a job that's so much in demand today, right? Like every partner that we have is hiring data scientist role, right? So share with the community, like what would you recommend is the first, like the programming language they use, and how can they kind of prepare themselves to that entry role as a data scientist?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. So I'm going to share a bunch of perspectives here, and then I think people can kind of pick and choose.
Yeah.
I think for me, getting exposed to, let's say, HTML, CSS was definitely helpful, and it was very like a non-intimidating way to get started, because I was not a student in like any program that had a little bit of programming. I think if people are in any sort of like engineering, like they probably had been forced to take like maybe like 100 level of programming, so maybe they are not intimidated at all, so they can skip that part. But I think for me, because economics was technically an arts in Waterloo, not that it really matters, but like what we learned was a software called Stata. So or like as psych majors and sociology majors will know, like SPSS or something else. So like I think those are actually pretty good, like very non-intimidating ways to get used to like thinking programmatically. But of course, like proprietary software like Stata or SPSS, they're more like they're for a narrow use case. So then you can kind of only use them to do like specific things, and it's like very roundabout to do anything. But it definitely still like got me used to the way that, okay, yeah, I can use, just like to boil it down, I guess, typing to create things. So it doesn't really matter. Like it could be literally whatever you learn. And like I know like psych majors, history majors probably even learn a little bit of that. Like I know they have to kind of crunch a little bit of like maybe in their 100 level for I think like historical data or like for their thesis or something. Because I know like I did a psych minor and I had considered doing a psych major like long time ago, and I know that those are required.
Yeah.
But if you're not in university, you can definitely do that as well. I think by whichever way, like HTML, CSS, or like that, or you just like go straight ahead to like Python. Like the way I started learning Python was actually from a book that's called like Automate the Boring Things in Python. It's like free, totally free ebook.
Yeah.
And it just has some like starting scripts and stuff. And I like stuff like, like how to like save files automatically, like all the files or something like that. Like, or like some basic stuff like, oh, like download all these things like in one go. Like some really like basic stuff. And now that I'm looking back, but that was just like a more concrete way, because I like to learn by doing. I like to learn by seeing things happen, either visually or like practically. So then I did that. But actually in my last year of the Waterloo, I did end up taking like the elective programming courses because I just had like leftover elective that I hadn't done yet. And then I did take an entry level course that was in like this language called like Racket, which is like I think what a lot of Waterloo students start with. And it's not a programming language that's used in industry. It's literally like I think a research focused language, like very theoretical, and then it kind of forces you to break things down into steps, and then you understand like the core concepts and stuff. But it's not used in industry, and people like always hate on it and stuff like that. But I felt that gave me a really good basic knowledge of like what goes on under the hood in a lot of languages. But I think that's also optional. I'm just saying that's like another roundabout way that I kind of got all of that. So I think Python is a good choice to me. Like if I had to start over, I would just start with that. But it's hard. It was hard for me because I like to tinker, to not have been exposed to stuff like JavaScript or from my school, like Stata or SPSS. And yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think, the path, I'm always fascinated. A lot of the people we've had so far on the show will always talk about the self-learning piece, right? And like more and more leaders and managers and people in tech are like, great, I didn't go to school for programming. I did this thing and I learned it in parallel. And I think it's fascinating. That's why when I tell the stories, because I think there is a lot of value getting a software engineer degree. So I'm not saying don't do that, but I think there is a lot of paths today to learn coding. Where did you find, when I think about self-learning, I think about two things that people struggle with. One is, how do I organize myself? Where do I start? So, starting with Python, was there websites that you went? You mentioned there was a book that you studied. Was there any other learning videos that you've done? And then how did you keep up the motivation to keep going and learning more and more to program? Because some people might get discouraged. Did you have a mentor? Did you talk to people? Who helped you through that process?
Ooh, yeah. So I think, I mentioned the book and I saw that it was linked. Boring stuff. Yeah, I think that's the accurate link. So I think for me, I tend to learn by doing things. So you mentioned the motivation part. So like, I just did that with the mind of making a game. So then I would look up specific tutorials, like all free. I think I've not spent a penny on like, I am, and I kind of wanted to make things, so I learned with the goal of making I guess making the game. So then I learned a lot of functionality that might be specific to the game but still gave me a really good overall view of the language. And I think this is what like a bit of advice kind of I would give to myself, and I did follow that and it worked out for me, is that like not to care so much about um just like keep absorbing and
Mhm.
absorbing, right? Like I think
Mhm.
there's diminishing returns to just like consuming and absorbing. And
Mhm.
for me, like once I consume like some courses, online courses, or like some videos, I tend to do like those like free or cheap
Mhm.
ones. Like YouTube is like so great.
Mhm.
But it really doesn't matter like which one it
Mhm.
is, because I would look it up because I want to make something myself. So let's say I am making a game and then I want to like maybe make a timer in the game, then I would actually just look up how to do that instead of like looking at like a 10-hour course that just like covers random things, because I can't absorb it. So
Yeah.
I feel that it's difficult, it's intimidating.
Yeah.
It's more comfortable to just like watch and watch videos and then not code. I mean, I've been there before, right? I've definitely been in the phase where I just like watch stuff and then I don't do anything. I
Yeah.
don't like lift my finger to code, but I find that I just like learn faster from example, and then from kind of being in control and like owning what I'm making with the games and
Yeah.
the things that I want to do. So let's say someone wants to make a web app or like some sort of like iPhone app, let's
Mhm.
say, like they can do a course on how to make a web app, and then they can
Mhm.
make that web app that like all the other people in that same course have done the same. That's great, right? But
Mhm.
now you know how to make an app,
Yeah.
but then now go and like make your own app. So then you'll be forced to like look at all those strange like edge cases that your app is doing, and that's more that like really mimics the real world
Yeah.
kind of work environment too. So I think that has always helped me learn like really quickly, because I'm not afraid to just like make mistakes and like just like stop like with the 10-hour videos and just like go
Yeah.
and create.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's very hard when people want to get into coding or learn anything. A lot of time we're used to sitting through lessons, right? That's kind of like how the education system have trained us. And so everyone feels like they need to listen to all these things to learn it in order to practice it. And the reality is, and if most of people like me, you can't absorb that much information, right? If you watch hours and hours in video, the amount that you really absorb and process diminish as you watch further. You kind of forget the beginning. So, I love the idea of like have a project, so you're applying what you're learning, and that's the best way to kind of move forward, right? So you say, I want to do project, this is the app I want to develop or the game I want to develop, and then learn all the components for it. So it makes it exciting also that you have a project working towards, and then you're like structuring the learning and learning all the stuff. I think we have a comment coming up. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Having project goals is definitely an important element in the learning because you can build that. And so, thanks, Jean-Marc, for sharing. Um, so, so you moved from your master degree to the first job and was data science role. Tell us a little bit about the career that you had so far.
Right. So I was in that role for around 2 years. So when I started, I was a new grad. So then I think there was a lot of, um, it was actually in a very large company. I guess, I mean, everyone can find it, but it's like Bell Canada. So it's like massive, massive corporation. I think that happened to be good for me. The reason being this, when I first started out, I think it's good to have some sort of mentorship situation. And I think that being in a large corporation, because there was like more people around,
Yeah,
so there were more people available to help me,
yeah,
if that kind of makes sense, right? Because I guess in a smaller company, maybe they could not even afford to have that time spent mentoring you and have that resource spent on mentoring you. And I think that I got a lot out of the kind of patience and just like learning about the way that things kind of work
Mm-hmm.
in the corporate world. Like, as to, whether I would like to stay in a large enterprise all the time in my career, I think that is really depending on people's preferences, because like right now I'm not there anymore. But then I think it's just like, what would I say? Like, for myself,
Mm-hmm.
after that role, I joined Clearbank, which is where I am now. So it's a much smaller company. It's like 200-ish people, and I have much more responsibilities, and I'm able to mentor other people in turn, which I was starting to do at Bell as well. But then I think just like as a starting point, I happen to enjoy the kind of luxury of having like people have the bandwidth to mentor me. But actually, I feel like at Clearbank now we are spending just like even same or more time on mentorship too. It just like manifests in different ways, I suppose.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's what I did.
Okay. So you were at Bell, and then after, how long were you at Bell, and what was the next job you went to?
I was at those 2 jobs.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So I'm gonna come back to your roles and talk about the jobs, but I really like to, once we now know your story, we want to also learn about your queer story. And so the underlying, tell us a little bit when it manifested. Was it university? Were you out at university? Were you doing any queer related activities in university, parts of clubs or organizations? Walk us through that queer journey.
Yeah, and I think mine is kind of interesting, but I am also not sure. I think there's like so many people with such unique stories that I really don't know if mine is considered like strange or not strange. But anyhow, I think I've always known since I was very young. Like when I was in elementary school, I knew. And I think because I was moving around so much, I keep coming back to that because that really impacts how I see the world. It's just like, I guess I was always the odd one out. So then I just like, once I started realizing that, I didn't really push back on it. I wasn't like, oh, I'm like quote unquote normal, like, oh, I'm gonna pretend that I don't like feel these things. But I kind of accepted it because I was like so used already to be the one that's like different that I was just like, this is just like another different thing. So I'm going to accept it. But then also it obviously caused me a lot of suffering as well. But I'll kind of touch on that. But so in elementary school, I think I was kind of like processing that, and like, I guess, like it was not, it's more like just like really innocent, like, childish like attraction. But like, I mean, that still meant something to me. And I think we have crushes from elementary school. That's like a human experience, I hope, I think. But anyhow, like those are like more like kind of in the just like childish and innocent, but I still like accepted it regardless. But I also already knew that was like weird, because like, I mean, all the popular media says that's weird, and all like grown-ups, right, also say that. So I kind of got the feeling, because I was a smart kid, just kidding. I kind of got the feeling.
It's very important also. Do you think the cultural background have played a role also? You moved around. Do you feel that your cultural background have impacted the perception also of thinking about yourself as a queer person, and how is the culture you come from, right? Like I come from Morocco, that was like a Muslim culture that saw that very negatively, and we are programmed to be ashamed of who we are, right? And so you carry that, and at high school you kind of get the realization, okay, this is who I am, and then we spend a lot of our life trying to reconcile our cultural background, if there is a religious background, the family, and the self, right? So I'm curious to hear, was there an impact on you, and when did you start to feel comfortable with yourself and being out?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. I think actually in Taiwan, the kind of main, I guess, like spiritualism is like kind of along the lines of like Buddhism or like Taoism. So I don't think they had any strict, like, they were not like strictly against it, but it was more like societally, like you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. But I guess that's like not necessarily related to the overall like let me try to phrase this better. It's just like there wasn't that sort of like violent kind of scariness, I think, from like those prevailing beliefs. I think so. It wasn't, because I think it's overall like very, you know, collectivist, and like, you know, you just need to conform to the group. So I think what I internalized at the time was just like, maybe on the outside I'll just, you know, kind of conform but also not conform and then I don't need to tell anyone necessarily. So I don't think I was like telling anyone in elementary school. I just like and I also didn't feel the need to, because I think I was too young to understand like what that meant. I just had the feeling it was wrong.
Did that feeling change once you get to high school and university? Or how long did it take until you kind of changed that? You start to feel differently and you were willing to share that with people around you? I
think in my final year of middle school, I think, because we're all like entering puberty and stuff. So I finally like, I told a friend of mine, and I mean, it was just like very, I guess like, I wouldn't say it was like problematic. I have lost friends because of telling them, actually, and especially in high school. But I guess I mentioned middle school just because it's like my first occurrence of like coming out to people. And in high school, I've definitely like lost friends or people who were just like distanced themselves due to finding out I was queer. And I wasn't like coming out like massively or openly, just like usually to like trusted friends who may or may not have been good friends, depending on their reaction. So I have encountered that. I've lost friends for sure. I have had a lot of struggles with my family because of that. I guess I'm not going to discuss like extreme detail, but like the most difficult part was actually with my family. Extremely difficult. Like I had a lot of struggles like behind closed doors with them about this. And luckily, I guess I'll touch more on this. That has changed since then. So I don't want to like, you know, talk shit about them, but it was like the most difficult part of me growing up, more than moving around, more than anything I've ever encountered. And I think when I look back on it, I am grateful, because I feel like living through that, it made me feel like anything in my academic life or in my professional life is nothing compared to that. And it's very difficult for me to talk about, so I can't, but I'm just going to share that is one of the most difficult things that I have ever survived. And that, on the bright side, has helped me be very resilient and I think that's why, you know, when, hey, I'm going to self-learn programming, like, yo, easy. Well, no, not really, but like kind of. It helps change my perspective a lot.
And thank you for sharing that. I think you know, coming out stories have a million shades of them, right? And each individual of us go through that experience very differently. And you know what I realize is as we tell the word and as we get comfortable with the family and a close environment, that really helps to feel empowered to do other stuff outside, right? And so, you know, what I'm hearing is going through that and building that resilience and having feeling comfortable with your family today also have a positive impact on you as a queer woman at work, for example, and at the job. Do you feel like you're bringing your queer self to work every day? Are you open about it? Like, how do you see that today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess like I'll just like have a mild disclaimer, like this is how I approach things, and then it's not like how people should approach things. But I guess I'll touch on like, so in university I was doing a lot of work volunteering for the LGBT student service and the student union at the University of Waterloo. I met a lot of people there, and I think it's because I felt comfortable putting myself out there at the time. And I think just having a group of peers there helped me be so much more comfortable into like, going into tech, because I guess Waterloo is like kind of tech heavy. So
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of, I guess, queer folks around me go into tech as well. So then that helped me become more comfortable. But I wanted to be in a more of a leadership role and kind of dedicate a large amount of time to it, because I wanted to kind of like pass that on in a sense, because I felt that I was at a good place where I realized that earlier on. So I think since university, I've been fine with just like kind of being out, but not by coming out to people, because I think that when I was in the professional world, I don't really talk about it because there's not a lot of opportunity to kind of bring it up. So I've had people, when people come out to me at work, usually it's like, oh, my girlfriend, or like my partner, or like as in knowing like whoever their partner is kind of will make that click into place. But just because like I haven't been focusing on that part of my life, I haven't been like, I don't have an excuse to like kind of bring it up. So I don't necessarily kind of like come out to people, but I think by, if anyone looks at, has known me since university, they will know.
Yeah.
And if people know me professionally and they happen to look at anything that I've written about, then they probably know, but I'm not going to assume that they know, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to explicitly tell them, because I think that it's like out there, and not like that's a pun or anything, but like I think that I'm not hiding it, but I'm also not like explicitly telling people, because there's no part in my life currently that I have an excuse to be like, hey, I'm like my
Yeah.
partner, blah blah. So
Yeah.
like I think it's hard for me to proactively be like, well, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's just my approach. And
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing from you is that maybe there is an opportunity here for companies and tech companies that we work with and we partner with or we work at. They have a responsibility to create spaces for people who feel comfortable to share that part of themselves. Because a lot of times I ask our partner, I'm like, hey, are there any LGBTQ2S plus people that work there? We'd love to interview them, have them part of our community. And I get it. They always say, we don't know. And I'm like, it's fair enough, because you're not going to be surveying people around this. Big companies now do it, and it's self-claimed. But I think companies have that responsibility to create spaces for people to have these conversations and allowing people to bring that authentic self and share it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, do you think is it the role of the responsibility? Is it the role of the company to help facilitate those spaces, or do you think it's up to the individual to do that?
Ooh, I guess I'll give my take, but once again, this is like from my perspective as someone who's like relatively comfortable with myself, and I don't feel like I need to like discuss it too much, not because of any sort of like staying in the closet feeling, because clearly I'm not, but like so my perspective is, I guess, as someone who's kind of, I've been at peace with this for several years, but of course it's still difficult sometimes. I've definitely heard like kind of like microaggressions in different places before, and like it doesn't go away. Like not, yeah, but anyhow, I guess kind of to bring it back, I feel it's good to create that space, but then I feel depending on the employee and like maybe the size of the company, like it might be difficult for the employees to like want to join that space, like no matter how kind of welcoming it is. So for example, in a large enterprise, like I think there were like many opportunities to probably like join an organizing team, let's say, of like the queer events, which they actually did have. But then I was just focused on like so much other things in my professional life that I didn't want to kind of put my time there. So I think it does depend. And I feel like, they're clearly organizing people on the queer committee at Bell. So, I mean, clearly they were comfortable with spending their time on it and comfortable with being out. But I think for me, I just like didn't have the time to invest in that. So I think it really depends. Like, I think there is the opportunity to do that, but then I guess like the employee might not just want to like do their stuff on their own. So I think I want to have the analogy of like, let's say hobbies, I guess, at work. Like, for example, like, okay, I'm not saying like, your identity is like a hobby. Like, that's not the case totally. But I'm just saying like, let's say I don't really talk about like all the games I play at work depending on who. And then there's friends at work that I will tell them, but I'm not going to tell like the whole company, like I'm like playing 8 hours of games on like Saturday, right? I'll tell my friends on an individual coworker friend to coworker friend basis. But I don't like necessarily like say out loud like, oh, I love like all these games. It depends, right? Because that's kind of my take is like it's like depending on my individual relationship with my coworkers.
Yeah. And do you feel like you don't want to share that part because there is a perception that people might have the wrong idea about you if you say I played 8 hours of games on Saturday, or I did this with my because it is like I think we talk a lot about the authentic self, right? And bringing and even me, I wonder a lot of time how much of myself do I bring to work, and how much do you share outside certain things, and what is the interpretation of that, and what is the perception that people might get? So that's why I'm like curious here, like. Do you think is that what you think about, or like
actually,
what? Yeah,
I would say that's a really good question too. I think it's like relevant to just like because clearly I have no hesitation about talking about it like literally in public, like here. I think it just like depends if the conversation is like in that direction. I would say so. I would say that for myself, I'm also kind of like a private person in general, right? So I think that has to do a lot with my upbringing and the way that I see like conversations and stuff like that. I actually don't overshare, I guess, on any topic. But I mean, I'm comfortable with talking about it if prompted or it's relevant. So that's just like my perspective. And let me think about this whole thing. So I think the best way to put this is this, like I think that it's a part of me that I don't like. I think people just like know it, or like they'll guess it, and then I'm not gonna confirm nor deny it, and that's like because like I don't know what they're thinking, right? So all I can do is just be like, hey, I love gaming, or I'm queer. And then people can think about that, what they want. I don't really, because there's other sides of me that are even more direct than this. I guess like when at work, if there's something on my mind, I just say it. I'm an open book, pretty much. Yeah, it just depends on like what's on that page in that situation. So I don't hide it actively, but I also don't like bring it up in general because I'm quite a private person. Apart from actually. Because like I do write a lot, right? I mentioned I write a lot about like the productivity and my career journey on my site, which is like susanshu.com, and I write up a lot about my data science career and stuff like that. There is like things I am quite open with, and there are things I've even like mentioned that I am queer on somewhere, but it's not the topic of the whole the whole article, I would say. So that's just like my take, because I feel like I've had so many years to get used to it that, all I can say on the topic has been said, and I don't have too much more to say.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I see, we're approaching the end time here, and I just want to have one last question for you. What like I saw you write a lot about career and data science career, and what are some of the last the parting words, advice you would give to someone who maybe want to be a data scientist but not sure and thinking about it? Do you have any advice on how they can apply, advance their career?
Ooh, yeah, I think one good thing to do is definitely see where you want to be and then plan for that. So, for example, if the goal is to be a data scientist, everything that you're doing from there has to be a curriculum kind of towards that. So, when I was thinking, like, hey, if I'm taking the 5th online course or like the 7th, watching the 7th YouTube series, is that helping me become a data scientist? To which the answer is likely no. But if I start making a project, is that going to help me become a better data scientist? Which is probably yes, because if I'm working on a new project for myself that more closely mimics the real world situation. So I think thinking about it in terms of like your actual goal, not your goal is not to collect online certificates. Your goal is not to collect videos that are watched. Your goal is not to collect side projects even. Your goal is to become a data scientist. So I think thinking about that will really help kind of like push that forward, because I have always been very results oriented. And that's why my career has progressed so quickly. Like it is possible. I think it is possible as long as you kind of keep that in mind, because I have mentored people and I see that they kind of get stuck in that like loop of like they kind of forget what they're in there to do, right? They end up like focusing on the short-term goal, which is like, oh, I'm going to watch more videos, right? But that's not your goal. That's not the goal. Just remember that goal and you can progress.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan, for sharing your story, a lot of advice with the community, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, kind of like as usual, to close this up, I like to share a little bit what I learned today, and it's amazing hearing you talk in your story. Self-learning was really key for your career, and the way you've kind of progressed is really learning by picking up projects, have a project you focus on so you can focus your learning and also advance. And I think that's really important, because a lot of time people spend so much time trying to learn the theory and everything and forget why they're there. So your advice of remember why are you doing what you're doing and what's the end goal in there, and don't get lost into the intricate. So thank you for that. I want to thank also our partners, annual partners for QueerTech, Unity Technology, VanHack, SpaceSafe, BreedLife, and Local Logic. I'm really excited for Sage also joining us this year as our annual partner. You'll get to hear a lot more about their stories in the upcoming QT Connect and other activities we do. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Our goal is to tell more and more queer stories in tech. So through either these live streams or our social media. If you love what we do, you can donate to QueerTech by going on queertech.org/donate. We also love, if you have any recommendations for queer leaders that either at your company or part of our community, you can reach out to me, reach out to us on our social media, and tell us about them, and we'll love to bring them on the show. I would like to talk to you. Our next episode is on March 25th at noon Eastern Standard Time. Mark your calendar. I'm really excited for our speaker coming up. It's Athena Lam. Athena is a B2B content marketer at Passbase, an identity verification company with offices in Berlin and New York City. Athena Lam is also Canadian and been very involved in the Vancouver area. And so I'm really excited to tell you her story and everything she accomplished. So thank you again for joining us. Susan, thank you so much for being with us, and looking forward to see you all on March 25th at noon.